there a list of members that have signed up in order to speak?
Yeah, it's not in order, but I have a rough list.
A rough list? Is there a way I can get a copy of that just so I have it ahead of time?
There's a chance some of these people might not even show up, but here's the confirmed.
Okay. So basically, if they all came at once, you'd go in this order, but if one of them shows up later.
I think are we doing it first come, first served? Yeah. Whoever comes first.
And is this like the 5-minute witness type thing? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
How many members are expected?
This is who's signed up, but it's not clear that they'll all actually come. You know, I've never been to one of these. Do they also like actually do like 5 minutes of questioning each for each witness, or is it like
no,
a?
No. It's they present and then the next.
Okay.
They can, or should.
Okay. Yeah, because if they did like a round of 5 minutes for every member, it would be.
And most of the comment from the chair or something like that. Just bang, bang, bang. I've done this before.
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to find it online. I couldn't find like other than I found like a video of another member day. I couldn't find anything
I've
about
done
it.
a judiciary member day, in fact, although it was a different chair.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine not much difference. A lot of times it's only just a chair and a ranking member.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it would be rude.
that makes sense. Does every committee do this?
I think nowadays there's another one today. There was one yesterday. Of the committees. I heard, and this is not confirmed, that supposedly every committee's got to do this, but
Yeah.
Committee will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. We welcome everyone to today's Member Day hearing. The chair would ask the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Stanton, if he'd be willing to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Member Day is an opportunity to hear from our colleagues who have bills within the jurisdiction of our committee. The Judiciary Committee has a number of very important topics in our jurisdiction: Constitution, civil rights, civil liberties, immigration, crime, and the functioning of our court system. These affects Americans' lives every single day. We have several of our colleagues here this morning to testify before our committee, and I look forward to hearing what they have to say. The chair now recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Nadler, for any opening statement that he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling today's Member Day hearing. Today's hearing gives us the opportunity to hear the views of our colleagues on both sides of the aisle about their legislative interests and priorities on matters within our jurisdiction. The Judiciary Committee is responsible for a broad array of issues, including the federal judiciary, criminal justice, administrative procedure, bankruptcy, civil rights and civil liberties, constitutional amendments, immigration, intellectual property, antitrust, and much more. It is no secret that Democrats in this committee have starkly different priorities than the Republican majority, whether it be protecting voting rights, enacting gun safety legislation, expanding civil rights protections for LGBTQ Americans and other marginalized communities, and working towards comprehensive reform of our broken immigration system, among many other important priorities. We also have areas of bipartisan interest, most notably enacting needed reforms to the FISA program. I look forward to continuing this important work together. I'm interested to hear from our colleagues today about matters of interest to them so that their views can inform the work of this committee. The House is fortunate to have a broad and diverse array of views among its members, and I know that this committee's work will be strengthened by hearing from our colleagues. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Without objection, all of the opening statements will be included in the record. I would remind our colleagues testifying today that your written statements will be included in the record in their entirety, and we ask that you summarize our testimony in 5 minutes. Our first witness is the gentlelady, seeing that she's at the table with her name tag right there. The gentlelady from the state of Missouri, Ms. Wagner, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Nadler for holding this Member Day hearing. One of my top priorities, and I believe is a top priority for all of us here, is to protect our children in our communities from exploitation. Tragically, our government is failing in this mission. The sexual exploitation of children has skyrocketed across the United States, and it is long past time for Congress to take substantive action to combat this horrific crime. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMEC, is the congressionally mandated nonprofit organization that operates the Cyber Tip Line, where online platforms are legally required to report child sexual abuse material found on their websites. Child sexual abuse material, or CSAM, is commonly known as child pornography. These are illegal, and let me underscore, illegal images and videos of children, more often than not prepubescent children being raped and sexually abused. In 2019, these are important statistics, the NCMEC Cyber Tip Line received 17 million reports of online CSAM. Last year, Cyber Tip Line received over 32 million reports. That is an 89% increase in just 3 years, Mr. Chairman, equal to approximately 87,600 reports of child rape videos per day. That is absolutely unconscionable. Making this problem even worse is the fact that under current law, there are no requirements regarding what must be included in these Cyber Tip Line reports. And because of this legal gap, online platforms do not consistently include substantive and actionable information in their reports. This often leaves NCMEC and law enforcement unable to locate and rescue the children depicted in the images and videos. In 2022, over 50% of the 32 million reports submitted to NCMEC could not be investigated by law enforcement because they included too little information. That's 16 million reports of child sexual abuse rendered completely useless. Congress must fix this, and they can. My bill, H.R. 5182, the Child Online Safety Modernization Act, or COSMA, directly addresses this issue. COSMA would modernize and enhance the NCMEC cyber tip line by requiring reports from online platforms to include information that actually helps law enforcement identify and locate the children depicted in CSAM, as well as the individuals involved in posting this illegal, again, illegal imagery. This includes very basic information, and we've spoken about this, Mr. Chairman, about the reports. So I want to be specific. Basic information such as an email address, IP address, or just a URL where the CSAM was posted. Additionally, the bill would extend the legally required preservation of these reports from 90 days to 1 year. With over 32 million reports just last year, law enforcement needs this additional time to properly and comprehensively investigate these cases. Lastly, this bill replaces the term child pornography with child sexual abuse material throughout all of U.S. code. Child pornography is an inaccurate and misleading term to describe an image or video of children being raped and sexually abused. The children in these videos have no consent and no control over their exploitation, and our federal laws should accurately reflect this abuse, thus the change to CSAM versus child porn. This legislation has been endorsed, I want you all to know, by a broad coalition of organizations, including the National Fraternal Order of Police, the National District Attorneys Association, the National Children's Alliance, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, RAVEN, and many more. I'm also proud to have the support of multiple members of this committee on both sides of the aisle. We have a real opportunity to make fundamental progress in this fight, and I ask that this committee favorably report out H.R. 5182 as soon as possible so we can give law enforcement the tools it needs to rescue children across the United States. I thank you all for your time this morning, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady for her testimony and for her work in this, her important work in this area to protect kids. Thank you very much. Our next witness is I think we'll go Democrat, then we'll come right back. So our next witness will be the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Stanton.
Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Nadler, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today about issues in your jurisdiction that are of great importance to my home state of Arizona. I was fortunate to serve on this committee in my first 2 terms in Congress. Boy, do I miss those 4 a.m. markups in this committee. One of my top priorities then, as it is now, is reforming our broken immigration system. Congress has an urgent duty to ensure an orderly, humane, and secure southern border and to protect Americans from illicit fentanyl and other deadly drugs that come through our ports of entry. There are bipartisan, common sense solutions we can employ. We need to deliver more resources to local governments and communities, including replenishing the depleted shelter and services program. We need increased funding to recruit and retain qualified personnel and improve technology and infrastructure at ports of entry along the southern border. At the same time, America is facing a border crisis. We're also facing a workforce crisis. To stay economically competitive, it's time to create new legal pathways and additional visa categories to support industries facing historic labor shortages and increase the number of available visas in critical industries like the H-1Bs. I also support expanding refugee pathways and in-country processing so that migrants are not forced to make the dangerous journey to the United States border. Finally, we have an urgent obligation to provide safety and security to our dreamers by passing the American Dream and Promise Act. They have been left in legal limbo for far too long. I stand ready to work with this committee to finally advance bipartisan, common sense border and immigration policy. Another one of my top priorities before this committee is to finally bring justice to America's downwinders. My bill, H.R. 4754, the Downwinders Parity Act, would extend the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act to communities in northern Arizona and southern Nevada who are exposed to cancer-causing radiation from atomic weapons testing. I was proud that in 2021, at my urging, Congressman Nadler led this committee to hold the first hearing on downwinders in 2 decades. It was an important first step, but it's long past time for the federal government to take responsibility for its actions. I've introduced another bill that falls under this committee's jurisdiction, H.R. 3269, the Law Enforcement Innovate to De-Escalate Act, to make a technical fix needed to allow law enforcement to procure and use more effective and efficient, less than lethal devices. Minimizing gun deaths and interactions between police officers and civilians is truly a bipartisan objective. Unfortunately, the development of less than lethal weapons has been stymied by antiquated definitions in a more than 50-year-old law, the Gun Control Act of 1968. This means less than lethal weapon could be misclassified as a deadly force, which may prohibit law enforcement agencies from adopting more innovative, less than lethal tools to help make encounters safer for officers and community members alike. I hope I can count on the support of this committee to develop a 21st century policy that makes all of our communities safer. We also need to pass the Afghan Adjustment Act. We owe an enormous debt of gratitude to the Afghan people for the ways they supported U.S. forces for almost 20 years, often at great personal risk. In the weeks before Kabul fell, my team and I worked to help a few of these allies, women who served in the Afghan National Army's female tactical platoon. Their work to support our mission and their gender makes them and their families a top target for the Taliban. Yet, after 2.5 years, many of these brave women still await asylum. This committee should quickly take up the Afghan Adjustment Act to give these FTPs and other allies certainty and stability. To close, I want to highlight a particularly painful issue facing my state of Arizona: missing and murdered Indigenous people. It is a national shame that such violence has perpetuated against Native American communities. In 2020, Congress passed the Savannas Act and the Not Invisible Act, instructing the administrative branch to take desperately needed actions to improve coordination and communication about missing and murdered Indigenous people. I urge this committee to conduct oversight over the administration and the previous one's implementation of these landmark laws and consider what more needs to be done to end this silent crisis. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this important opportunity to address the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Stanton. You're definitely efficient. 4 bills and a oversight request. We appreciate that. Your less than lethal legislation is something that we are seriously looking at. I think makes sense. So we appreciate that. Thank you. Next is the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman.
Oh, thank you. We just have one bill for you today. As you know, I'm a member of the Oversight Committee, and on there we deal with migrant issues, but this will wind up coming under the purview of the Judiciary Committee. I'm urging the committee to take up H.R. 4869, the Migrant Child Safety Act. The United States is currently in the midst of the worst crisis of unaccompanied alien children in our nation's history. As I'm sure you know, Mr. Chairman, about every month, 8,000 or 9,000 unaccompanied minors are coming into this country. In 2022, there were a total of 152,000 unaccompanied alien children encountered, the most ever in a single year. We're going at about a rate of 5 times coming in now. We're coming in under the Trump administration. The Migrant Child Safety Act would implement a number of changes. We had hearings in which I was kind of shocked at what the Office of Refugee Resettlement was doing and not doing. But in any event, we want them to now get background check requirements for the sponsors, which they've suspended, reporting requirements for children who go missing, and information sharing with state and local agencies. The Office of Refugee Resettlement is required by law to promptly place unaccompanied alien children referred to as custody by the Department of Homeland Security with sponsors deemed capable of providing the child's physical and mental well-being. However, reports indicate that Office of Refugee Resettlement has prioritized expedient release of unaccompanied children to the detriment of their safety. Obviously, it would be easier to handle the whole thing if they weren't letting so many people in here. The Department of Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra personally pushed for faster processing and discharging of unaccompanied minors to the detriment of the children's safety on multiple occasions, pressuring the staff at OR to treat unaccompanied minors or unaccompanied processing like a factory. He was quoted as saying, if Henry Ford had seen this in his factories, in his plants, he would never become famous and rich. This is not the way you do an assembly line. And you can imagine if they would treat native-born Americans here, they would never get away with it. These reports also cite evidence that as many as 2/3 of the unaccompanied children have been exploited by sponsors and forced to work illegal full-time jobs in hazardous conditions to pay off smuggling debts to cartels. Caseworkers within the ORR claim that HHS regularly ignored obvious signs of labor exploitation, such as single sponsors sponsoring multiple children, hotspots in the country where the vast majority of unaccompanied children sponsors are not the child's parents, UACs with significant debts, and direct reports of trafficking. In total, reports show that ORR has lost more than 85,000 migrant children in the past 2 years alone. I know that the Biden administration would claim it's a lower number than that, but I think everybody would agree it's in the tens of thousands. It's clear that Congress, can you imagine tens of thousands of missing children? It's clear that Congress needs to step in under the leadership of the House Republicans. Under our leadership, we've made some progress. H.R. 2 included language strengthening information collecting at ORR, but the language doesn't go far enough. In order to see real change, we must implement the policies within the Migrant Child Safety Act. This legislation has the following provisions. We have to ensure proper information collection from potential sponsors, including the name, date of birth, social security number, birthplace, proof of address, and results of background checks, immigration status, and contact information. Secondly, we got to require potential sponsors to provide their familiar relationship to the UAC through documentation, witness testimony, or DNA testing. Third, implement a reporting requirement to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children if ORR is unable to contact the sponsor for follow-up or well-being check within 120 days of placement. Then require that ORR notify appropriate state and local health or welfare agencies within 30 days of placing a UAC with the sponsor in their jurisdiction. And finally, direct ORR to attempt to contact a unaccompanied minor's parents before placing with a sponsor. Isn't that the first thing you'd look for if you found a child? Where's the child's parents? They don't care. Same thing, by the way, with the Department of Labor. They don't care. We find some child working at 2 o'clock in the morning, why look for the parents? Before I end, I'd like to thank Congressman Gooden for co-leading this legislation with me. I look forward to working with you guys on the issue. It'd be great to get it out of this committee. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman for his work on this issue, and we thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan and Ranking Member Nadler. The northern border security issue that we're talking about is an immigration issue, and that's why we're here today. Now, I've had the pleasure of meeting with agents of the CBP Buffalo sector, Erie Station, for the last decade. And I think we all know what's going on at the southern border, but all the attention's been down there. It has been on our northern border. And when you take a look at the pressure on our CBP, that northern border area, 5,500 miles, 5,525 miles, that's the longest continuous border in the world, is almost completely unguarded. There's one stretch, I think, of almost 500 miles where there is one agent patrolling that area. One. So when people say to me, so what is it that you're looking for here? And here's what we're looking for. Look, can you imagine going to work every day and knowing that no matter how hard you work, no matter how long you work, you have no control over the situation? We're outnumbered at the northern border. The numbers are off the charts of what's going on right now. And so, Chairman George, you know, this thing has gotten so out of control. The northern border people, the border control people are doing all the digital intake. So they go to work every day, but they're not on the border. They're doing intake for things that are happening on our southern border. Now, while the Biden administration refuses to believe that there's a problem anywhere in this country, because, my gosh, how could there be? Well, the answer to that is, please go down and see what's going on. And once you go down and you see the southern border, then how about going up to the northern border and look where it's completely unguarded? You look at that border across there and you get in the Swanton area, which is up in New England, the amount of fentanyl that's coming in through that area is incredible. And for this administration to sit back and deny that there's any problem going on there, you can put your hands over your eyes, you can put your fingers in your ears, and you can deny that there's not a problem, but there is a huge problem. The most surprising thing about all this Mr. Chairman, when are you going to get help from the other side that are going to say, we actually have a problem here? Yeah, hello, Houston. We have a problem. And we sit here day after day after day after day of watching our fellow citizens being attacked all over the place. And I'm really concerned about the northern border because that's the area that I represent, at least in Erie. So Representative Zinke and I got together because when I talked to him, he talks about things that are going on up in his area. So imagine the northern border. You know, the southern border, you got to come across the river. Northern border, you just got to take one step. There's no lines drawn. There's no fence. There's nothing. Completely unguarded. Completely unguarded. The irresponsibility of the Biden administration right now to sit back and continue to refuse to even acknowledge the fact that we have a problem, not only at our southwestern border, but also at our northern border. I would absolutely, Mr. Chairman, you know this because you've worked so hard on it. Wouldn't it be nice to get people from the other side to actually say, we do have a problem, and it's more important than a Republican problem and a Democrat problem. This is an American problem. And people can sit back and refuse that it's there, but they can't go to either one of those borders and see what's really going on and talk to those folks to see what's happening. I know people get upset because you got a passion for these things. Everybody likes to play nice and say, okay, fine, let's get along. I'll tell you what, you want to get along? Let's do what we're supposed to do. We took an oath of office. Why don't we come here just to protect all Americans? Not just those ones in the southwestern border. How about those ones in the northern border? So I've just asked you, Mr. Chairman, because I know you're a great supporter of this, and I would ask our colleagues, if you have not been to the border, please take some time and go down there. Don't listen to the publicity stuff out of the other side that says, no, there's no problem. So today, because this is really an immigration problem, and that's why I'm here in front of you, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking time to hear from me and my colleagues. We do have a bill out there. It's about the Northern Security Caucus, Northern Border Security Caucus. We need more people to get on board with it. We need people to have more attention to it. So I think the real purpose of coming here today was I knew that you would take time to listen to us. You would take time to fight for this, and we would all take this time to say, you know, we are never, ever going to give up on this and protecting the American people. So, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you so much for giving us time to come for you today and help support us on this. We're going to get a bill that's even more inclusive, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
I would just say thank you, and I do believe it is starting. You heard from Mr. Stanton a little bit earlier. He's talking about what's going on there. He's on the other side of the aisle. The mayor of New York, other Democrats, I think, are understanding how serious this problem is. So we appreciate your intensity and focus on not just the southern border issue, but what's happening on our northern border as well. Thank
We
you.
both know seeing is believing.
Yep.
Please, let's open our eyes. Let's go down and look at it. Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Chair, I thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Kim.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Jordan and Ranking Member Nadler. I want to thank you for holding today's Member Day hearing and allowing me to come and talk about some of my legislative priorities. I represent California's 40th Congressional District, which has been plagued by retail crimes. We see businesses victimized by large-scale thefts, it seems like every week. And these thefts are often part of a broader scam to steal goods, front them online or overseas, and launder money for criminal organizations. This scam is known as organized retail crime and is responsible for roughly $95 billion in losses for retailers every year. The California Highway Patrol has set up a task force to better respond to organized retail crime and to work more closely with local jurisdictions to crack down on organized retail crime, but guidance and assistance from the federal government is limited. These crimes are normally prosecuted on the local and state level, where federal law enforcement is often occupied with more serious and violent crimes. While I understand that federal law enforcement is not the most equipped to respond to retail theft cases, I do believe that the federal government can play a role in supporting state and local law enforcement, especially in cases of organized retail crimes where stolen goods or laundered money crosses intrastate or interstate lines. Investigations of organized retail crime can be complicated given the number of agencies that could be involved in investigating different elements of the crime, and there is no agency that has the exclusive jurisdiction over these cases when the crime crosses state lines. Since organized retail crime crosses different jurisdictions, federal enforcement agencies should be able to strategize on how to best support state and local enforcement in combating these crimes. There is a bill that I introduced, H.R. 316, Improving Federal Investigations of Organized Retail Crime Act. This bill directs the Department of State, the Department of Homeland Security, and the United States Postal Service and other relevant agencies to create a cohesive strategy and report to Congress on how the federal government can improve coordination and information sharing among federal law enforcement agencies and increase collaboration with retailers, organized retail crime associations, and state-run retail crime task force, and assist state and local authorities in compiling evidence for the prosecution of organized retail crime. While this is a small step in the right direction, we should note that there are a number of other issues that will need to be addressed as we seek to tackle organized retail crime. I know a number of my colleagues are working on this issue, and I thank them. And I stand ready to work with them and the Judiciary Committee to move legislation on this issue that is deeply important to my district. I would also ask the committee to keep in mind that California suffers from rogue prosecutors who refuse to enforce the laws on the books and immediately release criminals back on the streets after they are booked for misdemeanor and even felony thefts. So I also stand ready to work with you on this issue. Again, thank you, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Nadler, for allowing me to testify about my priorities, and I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you. We appreciate you testifying today and bringing this to our attention. Thank you so much. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Georgia. Ms. Green, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to come before the committee today. I have an important bill I'd like to talk to you about. My bill is the Protect Children's Innocence Act. This is my signature bill, and it has been a model used across the country by many states as they are working on passing or have already passed bills and made into law in their states, protecting children from a radical ideology that is spreading across America, and that is gender dysphoria. It's hard to imagine that today in America, there are doctors and there are many medical professionals prescribing puberty blockers, providing hormone therapy, and surgeries, actually cutting off children's body parts before they're ever old enough to vote, graduate from high school, buy nicotine, buy alcohol, join the military. This is not a political party issue. This is widely supported across America, across all party lines, that people want this to stop. And children need to be allowed to grow up before they make tragic mistakes that will forever change their bodies for the rest of their lives. There are no known studies on what puberty blockers do long-term to children that take them and what it happens to them later on as adults. There is also a growing movement all across America called detransition. These are many young people that made the tragic mistakes of having mastectomies, having castrations done to them, having genital mutilation surgeries when they were still in their early teens, maybe even before they were teenagers, and as they grew up, they realized they made tragic mistakes to their body, and they are trying so hard to warn many others, don't go down this road. But here's what's most disturbing. Gender dysphoria is not a virus. This is not a disease that's spreading. It's an ideology, and it's spreading across social media, and it's rapidly growing. In 2017, there were 15,000 cases. But now in 2021, and we don't have the numbers for 22 or 23, but by 2021, it was over 42,000 cases. This is new diagnoses in ages 6 to 17. Now, here's what's disturbing for any of my friends that think this is a federalism issue. It is not. Because in the United States today, we have over 12 states that are either passing bills or have signed into law laws that will take the rights away from parents to protect their children. This is what makes it a federal issue. We only have 19 states that are in the process of banning or restricting minors' access to gender-affirming care. Those have been implemented in those states, but if you look at over 12 states, and it's growing, where they are passing laws to take away the rights of parents and even take children away from their parents, we have to step in and make it a felony to perform gender-affirming care. I have example after example I'd like to introduce into the record of news stories where this is happening at large scale, talking about custody battles and judges determining whether parents are affirming their children's care. This is such a serious issue, and it's such a radical ideology, and it is growing at a rate that we cannot control, but it needs to be stopped right now. Our job, our greatest job that we have as adults, our greatest job that we have as lawmakers is to protect children. It is to protect children at all times, and we cannot allow this to continue. And if we allow this to continue, hiding behind the idea of federalism, we're wrong, and I'll tell you why. Our founding fathers would never say it's up to a state to take away, for their government to be able to take children away from parents. We can't allow this to continue. And so, Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time and will take any questions.
I think without objection, the gentlelady's articles will be entered into the record. We thank you for your testimony and your passion for protecting kids. We will next go to, I think we'll go to Mr. Siscomani and then Ms. Garcia. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan and members of the Judiciary Committee for allowing me to come before you today and testify. I come before the committee today to discuss my bill, H.R. 5585, the Agent Raul Gonzalez Officer Safety Act. I introduced this bill last month after consistently hearing from my constituents and local leaders about the detrimental impact that high-speed chases have in southern Arizona, specifically in Cochise County, which is in my district. The bill is simple. It makes it a federal crime to evade law enforcement within 100 miles of the border. To me, it's simply common sense that this should be a federal crime. If you're engaging in a high-speed chase and evading CBP or local law enforcement, you're clearly not a good actor. Unfortunately, the current laws does not make this crime in and itself, and it leaves the burden of prosecuting and charging these individuals to our local communities. This bill is named in honor of Border Patrol Agent Raul Gonzalez, who tragically lost his life in a high-speed chase last year while pursuing a group of illegal immigrants in Texas. Sadly, he's not the only person who has lost his life as a result of these bad actors' actions. In my community, we have seen bicyclists injured, countless hospitalizations, and tragically, a 65-year-old named Wanda, who was struck and killed by a 16-year-old smuggler while driving to her own birthday party. Drug cartels recruit individuals from across the country to drive down to the border, pick up migrants, and transport them north. The bottom line is that we need to change the calculus for those who endanger all of us when failing to yield to law enforcement. By making these actions federally punishable, we are sending a strong message to these bad actors that this type of reckless endangerment is not tolerated. At a time when it's arguably the easiest to cross our southwest border and be granted entry by this administration, we all should be asking ourselves, why these people are fleeing law enforcement. The answer is these are really bad actors who the cartels want to evade arrest. In August, I was proud to welcome members of the Oversight and Judiciary Committees for a border tour and hearing at Cochise College in Sierra Vista. There, Cochise County Sheriff Mark Daniels testified before us that in the first 5 months of 2023, there were 121 failures to yield just in Cochise County. He added, in southeastern Arizona, and cartel groups have dramatically increased in size and become more reckless, aggressive, and violent, bringing unrest and fear to the citizens living on the border. I am proud to have the support of 10 of our Republican colleagues. Additionally, my bill is supported by many local communities and supported at the federal level by the National Border Patrol Council, the Western States Sheriff's Association, and the National Sheriff's Association. These law enforcement groups and local communities are forced to deal with this problem daily, and Congress must prioritize supporting our law enforcement officials by moving on this legislation. I have said repeatedly that border security is a federal problem that we need to fix, and it should not be put on the burden of our local communities. Thank you again for allowing me to come before you today. I hope you can all join me in supporting this much-needed legislation. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman for his testimony and for the common sense legislation he's bringing forward. Appreciate you being with us. We'll now go to Ms. Garcia. Gentlelady from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ranking member. It feels kind of good to be back as a visitor this time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for hosting this Member Day. I think it is a critical part of the legislative process, so it's good to be back and be able to share with you my thoughts on one of my priorities. Our role as lawmakers is a special one. We are empowered by the Constitution to make laws which are necessary and proper to serve the nation as it changes in whatever form that may be. When issues arise across the country, we find creative, common sense ways to fix them. Today, that country we live in is also home to millions of dreamers, people who were brought here to the United States as children and who grew up here. In their heart, their soul, and their mind, they are Americans, except on paper. They know only America is their home. They contribute to society as taxpayers, small business owners, scholars, educators, and aspiring public servants. And during the COVID pandemic, they stepped up as essential workers. They served as doctors, nurses, and first responders to keep our communities healthy and safe. Yet they remain at risk of losing everything after living in this country their whole life and knowing no other country. They are in legal limbo. No family should be separated. By finding common ground and working together to fix our immigration system, Congress can provide a pathway for citizenship for dreamers and immigrant families. Mr. Chairman, this is not a partisan issue. 72% of Americans favor a law providing permanent legal status for dreamers, 72%. 66% support the same for those under temporary protected status, or TPS. This is necessary and proper. America believes in dreamers, and dreamers believe in America. I am proud to champion H.R. 16, the bipartisan American Dream and Promise Act of 2023, with the support of a diverse bipartisan group of co-leads, including Representatives Chavez de Rimmer, Duarte Salazar, and Commissioner Gonzalez Colon. Compared with similar bills, this bill stands out because it's narrow with its focus and very narrow with its language. It focuses solely on finalizing the simple, legal, and safe pathway to citizenship for those cast in legal limbo by Congress's inaction. Time after time, the federal courts have said Congress must act, and we must. This is a pragmatic solution which will have a life-changing effect on every district in this nation. This bill is designed for law-abiding people. It includes broad criminal bars and requirements for extensive background checks and biometric registration. And take it from me, I was born and raised in South Texas. I know a lot about the border. I recognize the importance of securing our borders to protect the integrity of our nation. Passing the American Dream and Promise Act will alleviate the strain on our immigration enforcement agencies, allowing them to focus their resources on addressing legitimate security concerns and keeping our country safe, while also acknowledging our responsibility to treat individuals seeking refuge with dignity and respect. Congress serves as their only hope for relief, so it is necessary and proper to find a permanent solution so they can focus on raising the next generation of doctors, teachers, and leaders in our country. This bill passed the House in March of 2021 in the last Congress, as well as in June 2019 in the 116th Congress. We have changed not one word. The only difference is that this time, for the first time, it is a bipartisan effort. With your help, I look forward to getting this bill passed the House again, third one's his charm, and signed into law in Congress. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Garcia. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Gentlelady from North Carolina, Ms. Manning is now recognized. I think you might hit that button, maybe. Is it on?
Start again.
There you go.
Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Nadler, members of the committee, I appreciate this opportunity to testify before you. I would be grateful to work together with all the members on this committee and on both sides of the aisle to help strengthen the fight against anti-Semitism and all forms of hate. I am here today as a proud co-chair of the House Bipartisan Task Force for Combating Anti-Semitism, together with Representative Chris Smith of New Jersey and 6 other colleagues on both sides of the aisle, including Representative Ted Lieu, a member of this committee. As you know, in recent years, but especially since October 7th, we have witnessed an unprecedented increase in anti-Semitic incidents and threats targeting Jews in synagogues, on college campuses, and all around the country. The Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Director of the FBI have all reported an increase in threats against Jewish communities in the United States, and the Anti-Defamation League has recorded an astonishing 388% increase in anti-Semitic incidents since Hamas's brutal attack on Israel. The United States has a long-standing bipartisan commitment to fight against anti-Semitism, and I am here today to urge the committee to take concrete steps to counter this rise in anti-Semitism by improving hate crimes reporting, strengthening DOJ civil rights protections, and implementing key provisions of the U.S. national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. First, to prevent terrible anti-Semitic hate crimes against Americans, we must begin by getting accurate nationwide data on the threat. As you know, since Congress passed the Hate Crime Statistic Acts in 1990, the FBI has collected and reported annual statistics on all hate crimes, including those motivated by religious bias. Last month, the FBI released its 2022 hate crime statistic, and this data showed a troubling reality, that anti-Jewish hate crime incidents increased at least 25% from 2021 to 2022, the highest record number in decades. And as concerning as that data is, we know it remains incomplete. That is because, first, law enforcement participation remains voluntary rather than mandatory, and second, because many agencies are struggling to transition from the old crime data system to the new National Incident-Based Reporting System, known as NIBRS. I'm glad that Congress has passed the No Hate Act to provide grants to help incentivize law enforcement agencies to improve and transition hate crimes reporting. However, I believe this committee can do much more to eliminate gaps that remain by requiring all law enforcement agencies to report hate crimes data to the FBI. Second, I believe Congress can and do more to help support the FBI's investigation and the DOJ's prosecution of anti-Semitic and other hate crimes. In addition to the rise in threats to the Jewish community, we recently witnessed a horrific incident in Illinois in which a Muslim American family was attacked by their landlord, who stabbed a 6-year-old boy to death, which the FBI's Chicago field office is currently investigating as a potential hate crime. The Bureau is also currently investigating a sickening series of threats posted over the weekend targeting the Jewish students at Cornell University. This Monday, the DOJ announced it had charged a man who threatened to kill our colleague, Senator Jackie Rosen of Nevada, one of the strongest leaders in the fight to combat anti-Semitism. We must do more to deter and prosecute hate crimes. That's why last week, the House and Senate bipartisan task forces for combating anti-Semitism led a letter from 64 members of Congress to the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and FBI Director Chris Wray, urging them to provide immediate resources to help protect the safety and security of Jewish Americans, Jewish religious and educational institutions, and organizations that are vulnerable to increased threats and violence. Finally, I encourage the committee to help implement key aspects of the U.S. national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. Last year, my colleagues and I led more than 125 members of Congress in a bipartisan, bicameral effort to call for such a national strategy, and we have played a leading role in its development. This strategy, which the White House released in May, is the first comprehensive whole-of-society effort to fight anti-Semitism. Given the recent spike in anti-Semitism, it is critical that we swiftly implement, authorize, and codify key aspects of the strategy, especially so that Congress can hold every agency accountable for the commitments they've made. So we are working on bipartisan legislation to do just that. I look forward to working with members of this committee on that legislation. I'd like to give a special thanks to my colleague, Representative Ivey, for standing up to protesters right before this hearing and informing them of the facts, that Hamas is a terrorist group that has massacred innocent Israelis and is currently holding 240 civilians hostage and is dedicated to killing Jews and destroying the state of Israel. We all need to stand up to the misinformation and the spreading of anti-Semitism. Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, thank you for your work on this committee and in Congress to help fight the scourge of anti-Semitism. I am grateful for your time today. I look forward to working together with you and members of both parties to protect the Jewish community and counter anti-Semitism and hate.
Thank you. Thank you. That was well done.
Mr. Chairman, if just for a moment, Representative Manning, thank you so much. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Well, we appreciate the action you took, Mr. Ivey. That's great. And this almost 400% increase in the last month is just scary. So thank you for that. The ranking member and I were talking just yesterday about some ideas that we think we can be helpful in this area. So we'll continue to have that discussion and see if we can do something.
Thank you. I would be pleased to work with you on that.
You bet. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Gentleman from South Dakota is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ranking Member, I've got 4 pieces of legislation I'd like to talk to you about today. The first 3 deal with firearms. First off, right now, military spouses are not considered residents to be able to purchase firearms or to transfer them across state lines. I think that's a really unacceptable barrier for our military spouses who clearly don't have the time to establish residency requirements before being considered residents. So the Travelers Gun Rights Act would just make it clear that military spouses have a special opportunity to establish legal residency earlier. We also have a situation where people who travel around the country in RVs are today not allowed to use a post office box for an address for them to be able to access their Second Amendment rights. This bill would also address that. Secondly, I'd like to talk about the Tribal Firearm Access Act. Kind of amazingly, you can use a foreign government's passport as a photo identification to purchase a firearm, but you can't use a tribal ID. These are government-issued IDs. You can use them for all kinds of things across the country. Most states you can use them to vote, but you can't use that tribal ID to secure a firearm. This doesn't in any way cut any of the other limitations on firearm ownership. It doesn't short circuit in any way the checks and balances in the system. It just says that can be your government ID for the purposes of securing a firearm. I commend the act to you. The third piece of firearms legislation is the Tribal Policy Department Parity Act. Right now we have a number of federal firearms restrictions that don't apply to state, local, and federal Law enforcement agencies, of course, they would have a different set of tools at their disposal than others, but that doesn't, those extra opportunities don't exist for tribal law enforcement agencies. At least not in all cases. Kind of depends on how they're structured. I think that's unfortunate. I think we want to make, and also, by the way, when they purchase firearms, they are subject to additional federal taxes, those firearm stamps that other law enforcement agencies are not hit with. We want to make sure that parity is put in place. All of these bills they're good coalitions, good sponsors. Many of them, we're also working with folks in the Senate. Senator Mark Wayne Mullen has been very helpful on at least 2 of these 3 bills. Again, I commend them to you. The 4th bill I want to talk about deals with the Supreme Court. Last year, we had a number of folks, including a number on this side of this committee, who proposed expanding the Supreme Court by an additional 4 justices. Some of us, myself included, would call that packing the court. It does not in any way increase American confidence in the judiciary. There isn't any sort of a study that says, oh, if you were going to put together the perfect Supreme Court, one that would best function operationally, that special number is 3. Quite to the contrary, you have every Supreme Court justice of which I'm aware who has opined publicly on this has said 9 allows for a proper functioning of the court. No less than Ruth Bader Ginsburg, before her death, Stephen Breyer, have talked about 9 being an effective number, and they have counseled against packing the court. And so my bill would just simply submit for a constitutional amendment that, and it's very simple. Sometimes we deal with 1,000-page bills in this body that it is hard to ascertain what do they really do. This would instead just say the number of justices on the Supreme Court shall be 9. There are 140 sponsors for this. I am most hopeful that this committee can bring this legislation up for action. We have many Americans who are already concerned that the Supreme Court has grown increasingly polarized. Having the size of the court ping-pong up and down on the basis of the last election in an attempt to push some sort of power dynamic politically is not where our country should go. And as a top priority, I would ask this committee to help us keep the 9. And with that, I would yield back or submit myself to questions.
I thank the gentleman. Some common sense Second Amendment provisions, and then some common sense on the Supreme Court. 9 should be fine. It's kind of the way I look at it. So we thank you for your testimony. And I think the committee will kind of hang in recess for a while. We got a few minutes till we got to go to the floor to vote, and we may have a few more members show up, but I think that's probably how we. Okay. I think we have a few more who are coming. So did you have a confrontation out here? Yeah. Good for you.
No, no worries.
Chairman, I move to adjourn.
We'll come to order. That concludes today's hearing. We thank our colleagues for appearing before the committee today. Without objection, all members have 5 legislative days to submit additional materials for the record. Without objection, the hearing is adjourned.